Okay, well, we can finally start putting something back together today. I got all my parts. I was not actually expecting these to show up because they didn't ship till Thursday night, but they showed up yesterday, so, and it's probably a good thing they did, because my other option was to go down to that field and start burning brush, which, if the weather would have done, it looks nice outside, except for there's a pretty steady wind blowing about 10 to 20 mile an hour, so it would have not been a good day for burning. And about all I could have done was went down there and started bucking up trees, kind of get everything pre-cut so I can get a pilot and start throwing on, which I'll probably still do a few afternoons this week, is run down there before I go to work for a few hours every night and buck some trees up, maybe, if I can see what I'm doing. Hopefully this damn lake effect snow settles out and you're not wading through. Well, I went out there and walked through it yesterday, and there were spots where it was like up to here, so, but that'll all settle out. So anyway, the only parts that I could not get for this, of all stupid things, is they discontinued the thrust washers for, you want to go inside? They discontinued the thrust washers for the counter shaft. So I couldn't get those, but there was nothing wrong with mine. I was just going to replace them because I was in there. But I got the direct drive clutch pack, the overdrive clutch pack. There's the sprag for underdrive. What do we got here? These are the thrust washers that I could get. This is for, that is for the sprag. This is for, who's calling me? Okay, sorry about that. That was a guy calling me back with a quote on a barn, actually. Where was I at? This should be the thrust washer for the sprag. This should be my spacer for the direct drive clutch. This is the thrust washer for the overdrive clutch shaft. That's my pressure spring. Those two bearings I was going to replace, my overdrive clutch return springs, and then this is obviously the seal kit and sealing rings and all that fancy crap. So that's where we're at here. So before I get too far into anything as far as assembly, we got one more piece we got to take apart. Actually, technically two. There. So it's just gonna have to warm up a little bit. It's got a layer of frost on it since I brought it up here. So before we get too far, we got to take this guy down in the press and get this pushed back so I can get this snap ring off, so that we can disassemble all this and I can get the new seals on my direct drive clutch piston. So it's cold enough down in the barn. You know what, screw it, I'll take the camera down there, we'll do it real quick. I don't know how much you'll be able to see because it's going to be kind of dark, but we'll do what we can do. The press is not going to like working today because it's going to be cold. Okay, so this is going to be slow because that oil is cold. So you got this snap ring here, so you just get it lined up where you can work at it, and then you got, we made this special tool. In the book it says use Oliver tool such and such, and it gives you a drawing and a picture and all that fancy crap. But basically all you got to do, or all you need to do, is be able to, since this is all spring loaded, be able to hold it down safely so you can get the snap ring off and then be able to retract it safely, is the whole thing here. So you want to be able to give yourself obviously enough slack in the press that when you let go, you'll be able to take all the stored energy out of the spring, and you don't just bring it right back to the spot where it's at, because then you're gonna have a mess on your hands. Oh, this oil's moving slow. This is the bad part about having the press down here in the winter. It's naturally all single acting, so it takes a second for the oil to flow down into the plunger. Okay, now with that out of the way, you just get that up there like that, and then you can let her go. Just like that. So you want to give yourself, when you take one of these apart, you need about 3/4 of an inch of air between the foot of your press and whatever you're pressing on to take up, because you're gonna need about 3/4 of an inch of expansion to get this all loose safely. So now we can go back up to the shop where it's warm and do what we need to do to this. Alright, so we'll finish getting the snap ring off of here. And take the retainer off. And your spring. Yeah, you're fighting that guy. And then your collar. And then, if you put a little bit of air into that hole right there, you just want to, and it'll pop the plunger out. So let me get need an air hose. Over an air chuck with a rubber tip. That's all it takes. You don't want to like cram it down in there, because then it'll put full pressure to it, and well, let's just say you manage to get 90 psi in there pushing down, because you're probably going to lose a little bit of air because you won't get a perfect seal. So let's say you put 90 pounds of air on there, plus whatever the surface area of that piston is, that'd probably be enough to damn near break your hand if it let loose all at one time. So now that's that, and the only reason we got to do all this is because you got piston seals, because this is obviously your piston that actuates the direct drive clutch. So you got a piston seal here and a piston seal here that you got to replace. So we can clean this up real quick because it's obviously still full of oil. There were some floaties in there. Looks like pieces of clutch pack. But I don't see anything. There's no damage to the piston. Nope, it was definitely pieces of piston seal. There's chunks coming out of the... That's hard as a freaking rock. So if those seals were falling apart, and as hard as they are, that that piston was getting ready to fail, so you would have lost direct drive. So it's a good thing we're doing this. But anyway, I'm going to get this stuff cleaned up, and we just put new seals in it and put it back together, and wham bam, thank you Sam. So okay, so I got the old piston seals out. Piston seals are usually 2 pieces depending on the style, which is the most common. You'll see these in cylinders and all sorts of stuff, but you got a composite sealing ring made out of some sort of whatever you're using for a hydraulic fluid. Sometimes not always, but they're made to be resistant to whatever type of fluid you are using to actuate the cylinder. And that composite ring is backed up and energized by an O-ring. So obviously on the outer one, the O-ring goes in first, then your sealing ring, and on the inner one, the O-ring goes in first, and then your sealing ring. So with that being said, you give them a little bit of schlickum. And it's probably hard to tell on the camera, but these are actually profiled. The area that faces the O-ring is flat, and then the area that actually does the sealing has got a crown profile to it. But that outer one basically broke as soon as I touched it and tried to get it out. So it was not long for the world to begin with. And an OD ring is usually rather fun to get on because they are hard. So you usually got to warm them up a little bit, and they'll stretch slightly. And they'll go back down to size, but you generally have to work them a little bit. So we're going to do this to make it a little easier. And you want to be careful not to roll it. You want to get it in there square. Okay. So now that that's all together, you slick up your landings. That one's already, that's my oil rag. And then you can slide this guy back together. Being very careful that you try to not hurt the seals, which can sometimes be a little difficult. It looks like, there we go. Damn it. Oop. I'm fighting that center one. Come on out of there. The outer one wants to go. The center one, we're going to have to help a little bit. I just realized you can't see. go. And you don't got to be worried too much about rolling them back out of the groove like you would if it was just an O-ring seal, because they're hard. They're not going to roll back out. They can't compress. So basically the only thing you got to be aware of is if you put it back in and then you find little bits of plastic that got cut off, then you probably got to take it back apart and get new shit, because you just ruined your seal. So with that together, you can put that retainer back on, and that muffler, and the sleeve, and the spring, and the keeper. Then we put it back down in the press it back down, put the snap ring back on, and you're good to go. So, you know how that works. We don't need to show it again. Okay, now the next thing you got to do on your output shaft is replace these steel sealing rings. Because obviously this oil groove right here is what lets oil in to actuate that clutch piston that I put you into direct drive. These little guys are a cocksucker because they have, it's not going to show up good enough on the camera. They interlock right there at that joint. So they're hooked together like this, and you got to try to get them apart. And it's a good time. But the reason they use these is, they are self-energizing, and because this is all wet clutches, it's all wet, everything is supposed to run in oil. They're not trying to keep oil out of anything. They actually intend to have a certain amount of leak pass through here for lubrication purposes, is why they don't have an actual, like what you would think of as an oil seal here, is because these rings are engineered to have a certain percentage of leak by to lubricate everything. So these things, you will find them where the little tabs have broke off and they won't lock together anymore. So but obviously they come in the kit. You're gonna replace them anyway. You're just gonna cuss getting them apart, because you gotta like push one side down and get one side up, and then you gotta wedge something in there to finish prying. And oh well, that was easy. Normally they do not come apart that easy, I swear. Probably because these things are getting wore out. Okay, and these are the new ones. I don't know if it'll show up any better. That profile, yeah, you can see it better there. They hook together like that, and then the little ears don't let them separate again. And it's also probably important to note for anybody that's ever done this before, when you buy these kits, they contain all the parts for every variation of, I think this kit covers a 2-speed and the 3-speed. I believe, don't quote me on that, because I actually have not rebuilt a 2-speed yet. I have had one apart to reseal it, but I have not actually like went through and did the clutch packs and all that stuff. And I can't remember if the seal kit for a 2-speed is the same as a 3-speed or not. I'm pretty sure that kit covers all variations of the 2-speed and all variations of the 3-speed. So there are parts in there that you will not use. So this is probably one of the few cases where when you get done with your overhaul, it is okay to have spare parts left. Okay, now the fun task is hooking them back together. And believe it or not, the big ones are actually a little easier because you got more room to work. These little guys suck. Okay, so once these sealing rings are on, you're good. Do not, I repeat, do not think you need to lubricate these before you put them in like you would a regular, any sort of actual seal, because if you put any sort of oil or grease on these things to make them easier to put in, you'll never get a hold of them to snap them back together. So put them in dry. And then obviously you want to clock, and right now it doesn't matter, just pay attention when you slide everything back together in the housing, but you want to make sure that you clock the splits in them so they're not in line with each other, kind of like a regular piston ring. So with that, this is there's a thrust washer that goes right here. This is the old one, and this is the new one. And just for comparison, the old one is measuring about 60 on the dot, and the new one actually is not as wide as I thought. The new one measures about 61. Pretty even. So this is wore a little bit, but it was fretting. The thing that worried me and the reason I wanted to replace it is it's fretting close to, like, right here. You can feel there's a sharp edge, so it was fretting some. But just to make it a little sticky so it doesn't slide around everywhere, just put a little bit of grease here. And we can set that guy on there like so. And with that, in the spirit of, I'm gonna throw this away real quick, in the spirit of getting rid of parts, we are good to start assembling the clutch pack. Okay, so this is obviously a wet clutch, so when you put these together, they want you to oil the clutch discs so that when they take their first shift hit, they're not dry. So I usually use 30 weight motor oil just to get them slicked up. If it was well, let me get an addendum to that. So the 2 speeds, they recommend even to this day that you run, I can't remember if it's type A or type F automatic transmission fluid. We usually just run Dexmert. Because the clutch pack linings in the 2 speeds are made to take ATF. The original clutch pack linings in the 3 speeds were made to take ATF. When they went to, I actually, without the service bulletin, cannot tell you what year it was, but I would assume it would be when they came out with the Workhorse series or like the Red Stripe Field Bosses. But at some point, they switched clutch lining material in the 3 speeds so that you could run universal hydraulic oil, Hy-Tran, whatever you want to call it. So the clutch packs are different. So hydraulic oil or 30 weight motor oil is going to be fine for wetting the clutch packs in a 3 speed. If you're going to do a 2 speed, you want to use ATF to wet the clutch pack. But there's only one clutch pack to worry about in a 2 speed to begin with. There's a clutch pack and a sprag. That's how you get your 2 speeds. So with that being said, there are 6 clutch plates, 5 separator plates, and your thrust plate. Aaron, I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name because it's something ski. And I don't want to butcher it. But one of you guys, his name's Aaron, starts with a K. Sorry, I'm not saying it, I just don't want to butcher your name. So he looked up in their 1950T manual for me the width spec for this thrust plate, and it is right like dead nuts on for as far as thickness measurement. So there's nowhere there is. Now this is a older first generation 3-speed clutch drum, so your back facing is actually part of the drum. On a newer 3-speed, there would be a second O-ring or a second snap ring groove about 1/4 to 3/8 inside the clutch drum with a snap ring. There would be another washer that looks similar to this in there, and then you'd start your clutch pack stack. But the way it sits right now, because this is part of the drum, your stack starts with a clutch plate and then a spacer plate, and you stack out and then end up with the thrust washer. So, with that being said, now that I've talked your ears off, so that. Well, someone just pulled in the driveway here. I'm gonna have to shut you off, but you get the idea. You just wet them, stack them. Okay, so I got the clutch pack stack up made. When you put your thrust plate in, you want to make sure that you got the ground side. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's ground front and back, but you got one side that's obviously wore to the clutches and one side that's got a wear mark from being hit by the piston, so you want to make sure you get the clutch side down. And then you can slide your input shaft back in, or sorry, output shaft back in. And the snap ring goes in. And the kit comes with new snap rings, so there you go. And obviously that kit's got 2 snap rings, but you're only going to use one because this one does not have the second snap ring. So first spare part you're going to have when you're done. So there we go. And then this set of teeth right here is obviously where your planetary is going to ride, so because that slides on right here. So with that, you have your direct drive clutch pack and output shaft assembled. Okay, so now we'll do the overdrive clutch pack. But before I put anything together in here, this surface right here has a thrust washer pushing on it. And it's just a little bit wore. It's not terrible, but the big thing is it's kind of fretted right here on the ID. It's got a little bit of a burr turned up. We don't want any of that chipping off and getting into the bearing. So real quick, I'm going to knock that bearing out so we don't contaminate it, and take a deburring tool and clean that casting up a little bit so that we don't have any little shardy bits falling down in there and taking our bearing out. And then we'll be ready to start assembling this. Alright, so I worked ahead a little bit. I got the overdrive clutch housing put back together. Got the bearing back in it. Got the seal pressed in it. Cleaned up that little bit of burr right there. That's very normal. I have yet to tear one of these apart that doesn't have that little bit of a hickey. So you just clean it up, put it back together. The only thing that sits on here is a thrust washer. So, and then I got the new seals and everything on the piston. The easiest way to put the piston in this thing, since you can't physically really get your hand down in there and get any leverage because of the room you got, is you take your thumb and you hold down on one side and you take a soft hammer and you just tap on the other side. And as long as the seals have shrunk back down to the size they're supposed to be, it'll pop right in. So you just got to make sure you're not pinching or cutting the seals when you're doing that. But the rest of the overdrive clutch gets assembled. You turn the housing or the whole 3-speed housing on end, and you stack everything, and then this goes on last. So we're done with this for now. This is the Planet Gear support. The only thing you got to do to this is put the sealing ring on it, which I already did. When I popped the old one out, the locking tab actually broke off, so that was not long for the world. And then you got your sun shaft, which holds your sprag clutch and everything, and the planet gears for your planetary run on this. So that's your sun gear. Again, you got 2 sealing rings here, which I already replaced. One of them, when I took it out, the locking tab broke off, and the other one just plain broke in half. So, near as I can tell, just by the way these are worn compared to the new ones, I'm not so sure these have ever been replaced, even when this thing was overhauled last time. So, if it was even overhauled, there's obviously been a part at some point, but Lord knows if they actually put any new parts in it. So, there's that. And then you have your carrier bearing, and we're going to put a little bit of oil on that so it's not dry. And that guy just sets in there like so. And I just want to make sure I'm doing all this right. This is the old thrust washer for the sprag. We're throwing that out. This is the new one. And it does not, these things have lubrication notches cut in them, and it does not specifically state in the manual which side goes up. But if you look in the picture, they have the notches facing the sprag, so put that in there like that. With a little bit of oil. And then your sprag. Now, obviously, sprag clutch, one-way clutch. It's got to go in there the right way. So, the book, and this is a reprint, so the picture's not clear, but the drag strips, which are these little copper-looking pieces right there, which are spring-loaded and keep it, when the sprag goes slack, that keeps it from rotating. So it says, needle brush, sprag spacer, sprag clutch in sun shaft with back of drag strips on clutch facing planet gear end of shaft, so out. And if you look at the picture, it's kind of hard to tell, but the back of the drag strips facing the planet gear. And if you look, the sprag has a lip on top. That lip right there. That faces out. If you put the sprag in backwards, you got no underdrive because it won't grab. So, very, very important. And the first time you do this, you'll double check, triple check. You'll probably have this thing in and out 4 or 5 times, making sure you put it in right, just because you're going to worry about it. So, there's that. Okay, now, if you'll recall, when we took this planet carrier out, we got this one damn gear that for some reason ate into the planet carrier. Right there. Appears to be no damage to the gear. The bearing still feels fine, all that, but it ate into the planet carrier for some stupid reason. Well, a couple years ago, actually probably more than a couple now, I was actually down at the dealer, because now they're a New Holland dealer. I think I was buying baler twine or something. But I was actually down at the dealer that did all the work on this and screwed it all up. And they were in the process of getting rid of all their AGCO stuff because obviously they were being taken over by New Holland. They're actually a Bain Welker dealer now, for anybody that's familiar with them. But they had on the shelf a brand spanking new, never installed Planet Carrier. And I got one hell of a deal on it. I think I got it for like 75% off or something, because it seems like, I'm pretty sure this thing new was $1,200, $1,200 or $1,300 for this, and I think I got it for $300 or something stupid. And I was like, heck yeah, throw that in there. So I actually got this. I got a brand new PTO clutch housing. I got a bunch of stuff. But so anyway, we're gonna take this guy and take all the guts out of this guy and put it in here, and I'll save this Planet Carrier because there's a chance we could somehow, well, there's a chance, you know, we could fix it, or there might come a time where you have an aw shit and it might be better to have one that's got some wear in it than to not have one at all. So, but we're gonna disassemble this and put this on here. Okay, so first thing, you take out these snap rings that hold in the Planet Gear shaft, or the Planet Gear shafts. And they give you these snap rings new in the kit, so you can pitch these. Even if you're not going to tear this apart, it's a good idea since you got them to replace these snap rings so you don't have any issues later on down the road. And then, in order to get back there to push shafts out, you pop the bolts out that hold the Planet Carrier onto your ring gear. So the best thing to do with her to use for that is a impact. And the other thing I've found, and this is a good example, is these internal tooth washers are usually split like that. So if you're in here this far, it's usually a good idea to run these bolts out and replace those washers while you're in there. And to tell you the truth, I'm seriously considering replacing those bolts because the threads on them are kind of not in the greatest of shape. The threads in the ring gear are fine, so I guess I don't know what's up with the bolt. But now that's out, you can get back here to the shafts and push those guys out. And just for wear reasons, it's a good idea to keep the shafts and everything matched up with the Planet gears they came from. I mean, it's a little barked up, but there's no damage to the bearing or the cage, and there's really not, surprisingly, any damage to the gears, so I think we dodged a bullet, but there's, wow. It's odd that one gear would wear and all the rest of them would be fine, but that's pretty bad. All the other ones are perfect. It's just that one. I don't know if it wasn't getting oil for some reason or what, but that definitely needed replaced. Okay, so I had to run into town and get some new lock washers. We didn't have any. I was going to replace the bolts, but I cleaned the threads up in the ring gear, and I found a bunch of this gray Loctite looking shit. So I was like, well, that's odd. So I cleaned the bolts or threads up on the bolts and got the same shit. So I don't know if they like Loctited them or something stupid. You're not supposed to Loctite them, but Lord knows what the heck they did. So anyway, all the threads cleaned up okay. So I'm gonna be able to reuse the bolts. I test fit them. Normally, if the threads are screwed up that bad, if you run the bolt in, you can wiggle it when it gets down in there, and everything felt good. So you torque these to the torque spec is 48 to 52 foot-pounds. I'm gonna run them to 50. I'm gonna do it in 2 clicks. The first one 25, the second one 50. So, all right, just able to sneak a cant twist clamp in there. So, starting on this one, it looks like, and yeah, we're set at 25. Oh, I see my problem. Getting nervous there for a second. It's just drawing the gear down onto, or drawing the carrier down onto the gear. Okay, now we're bottomed out. I was getting really nervous there for a minute. Torquing bolts is about the scariest thing you could do as a mechanic. Okay, I'm gonna have to get a second clamp. This thing keeps wanting to spin on me. I was afeared of that. I'm gonna get one right there. Okay, try this again. One click, 2 click, 3 click, 4 click. I'll run it up to 50. And Dad also just bought 2 brand new torque wrenches, and I'm not used to these things yet, so okay, now we'll re-click them just to make sure. Alright, there we go. And the book did not specify to lubricate those to torque them. I looked all over, so I torqued them dry. Generally, if they want you to lubricate for torque, they will specify lubricate with oil or grease or anti-seize or something. So there's that. Now we can start reassembling our gears, which I need to find my snap rings. They're all hiding in here. And we're going to oil these bearings. Where'd my oil go? Where'd my oil go? Seriously, where'd my oil go? There it is. Apparently Dad used it for something and put it back. So, we want to slick this guy up. They got these cutouts here because they interface with the pilot on the ring gear. So you got to make sure that that's going to line up right. Apparently, these being new bores, they got a little bit of they must have a little bit of a burr in that snap ring groove. I have to clean that groove up a little bit. Okay, it took a little work. Had to put a flapper wheel on the die grinder. I made sure to get a dull one. That way I wasn't taking a bunch of meat out, but because using a dull flapper wheel, it takes a while. But there's just a little bit of a burr on every one of those snap ring grooves. And it's still a little bit of a chore to get the pin in, but it will go in now. So I test fit all of them. There's one. Okay. Everything feels good. Nice and smooth. No more big old gouge wore in the planet carrier. The only other thing you got is the bearing, which I'm not going to bother oiling that until we go to put it together, otherwise it's just going to sit in the box and make a mess. And then you got the planet carrier thrust washer that goes there, but again, you can't really do anything with it until you go to assemble it, because otherwise it just sits there and does nothing. So that's going to wait. So now we can get the planet carrier out of the way and move on to the next step. Okay, so now we can start assembling the input shaft, which is the one that we got to replace the big bearing on. But before we do that, we need to put the pilot bearing and the shaft seal in here, with the seal going first, the bearing going second. And that's this assembly right here. And that seal, install inner oil seal in input shaft with lip seal facing away from clutch release bearing tube, which is this. So you want the seal lip facing the inside of the 3-speed, so that way, at least while you're assembling. See if I can put you. I'll be able to see right there, right? Yeah, you can see right there. Now, shitty part is none of our bearing drivers, our seal drivers, are that size, and pressing a seal in like this is sketchy because this your broadside here is the one that's the nice one to drive off of because you got plenty of surface area. You got to drive it this way, so you're driving right on the lip of the seal frame, and you got to be careful not to hurt the seal. So, in order to get this thing started, well, first off, we're just going to worry about getting it started, so we can use a slightly oversized bearing driver to get it down flush with the edge of the hole. And then we're going to have to use the old socket trick to get it in the rest of the way. This one do it. Perfect. But the big thing is to at least get it started, because like if you started with the socket and the socket accidentally slipped inside of it and blew the seal up, or blew the seal frame up, congratulations, you just ruined the seal. Alright, so we're started. And now, the old socket here. I'm gonna have to, there, seal driver. Oh, and that socket's too big. I wondered why it felt funny. And this socket's actually slightly too small. It's going in though. And there's a shoulder in there, and you just drive it in until it touches the shoulder. And since we're undersized of the seal, you want to be gentle with it so you don't deform it. And looks like we're a little high. Alright, we should be able to finish seating it with the bearing. There we go. And that part's done, which frankly was the most stressful part because I was really worried about screwing that seal up since I didn't have a driver exactly the right size. So, good there. Okay, now that that's done, the bearing can go on. Before the bearing can go on, you want to put your retainer plate on, because if you put the bearing on and you can't get that on and then you're screwed, you got to pull the bearing back off. I was impressed too. Both these bearings are made in the USA. This one's an SKF and the other one was, I can't remember what the other one was, but they're both USA bearings. Surprised the hell out of me. Now, if you'll remember, we are probably most likely going to be slightly undersized on the shaft. It's going to be close, so just to be safe, I'm going to put this on with some bearing retaining compound, just to make sure, because the whole reason we're replacing this bearing was because the inner race was spinning on the journal. Luckily the bearing took the brunt of the hit. The journal's actually in decent shape, but so we're going to put that with some bearing retaining compound, and I'm going to just go ahead and take it down to the press and press it on the bearing. That way we don't hurt nothing. Get it on there square. So I'm gonna do that off camera because it's pressing a bearing on a shaft. Y'all know how that's gonna turn out. So I'll catch you when we get back. Okay, bearing's on. It fits good. The inner race doesn't turn. That's the big thing. I shot some oil in it so it's running smooth. Put the snap ring on it. So we're done with this for a minute. Now we have to put our shaft seal here, which is this fella. Again, we're driving on the wrong side of the seal, but that's the way it's got to go in. So too small. Too small. Stuck in the box. Come on, you dirty bastard. A little oversized, but this one just drives in flush, so that doesn't really matter. And again, it says right in the book, install seal with seal lip facing away from clutch pilot, or pilot bearing, clutch release bearing tube, or whatever. That tube. But it would stand to reason because this seal and the one in the input shaft are both meant to keep the oil in the 3-speed. So you obviously want the seal lip facing the 3-speed. There it is. The good hammer. Hopefully it's the seal in the overdrive clutch housing. I fought that thing. I bet it took me 20 minutes to get that damn seal in there. This one might turn out the same damn way. Basically what I ended up having to do, and I'm probably going to look like I'm going to have to end up doing it this one too, is I took it down in the press and just set it up there with the hockey puck and set it on there and just used the screw. I didn't even use the press, I just used the screw because that gives you enough advantage, and I pressed it in with the screw. So I think I'm going to do that before I hurt this thing, because they fit tight. So I'm gonna get that pressed in and I'll be right back. Okay, seal's in. That went better in the press than it did trying to start it by hand. The worst part's starting them because I always want to rock and shit, and then you worry about twisting everything. But you start it with the press, you got a bigger footprint on the foot of the press, so you can use the screw, and it forces it to stay square. And once you got it squared up and started, you're golden. But you drive that in, there's a shoulder you drive it up against, and then it's seated all the way. And then once that's in, you can put the input shaft back in, but first you want to put some slickum on the seal. Almost there. There, we seated. The worst thing I hate, or the biggest thing I hate about installing this bearing is the bearing and the seal both touch the shaft at the same time. So you can't see the seal starting, but they put a really nice chamfer on there and everything, so as long as nothing stupid happens, you're usually okay. Now, I got to go get me some lock washers for the screws so we can put our retainer plate back on. Okay, so the last things we got to do as far as the sub-assemblies here is get this spring put in for the for the main relief. And just for shits and giggles, we're going to hold this new one up next to the old one and see. Huh, I'll be damned. The new one's actually shorter than the old one. Not so sure how I like that. But the new one definitely got a lot more ass to it. I wonder if they have I wonder if it's an updated spring or something. Because this one's definitely, the wire's about the same diameter, but this one definitely takes a lot more pressure to make it give, so I guess we'll send it. And I already put the new copper washer on the plug. Now we'll clamp her down to the base here. Or the bench, I mean. Da-da-da-da. And I'm trying to remember, I think that's 1 1/8 inch French, if I remember right. 1 1/16. Might be 1 1/8 inch. Yeah. Always go with your gut. Okay, there's that. We've already put the new O-ring on the spool, so that's good. Everything else on this is squared away. So we can go ahead and put the pump back on. And for that, we need this here gasket and some Permatex. There it is. Oh, let go, damn ya. Oh, wow. Might be having to get a new bottle of this before I go putting the motor together. I'm going to have to get another bottle of this. I'm going to have to get another tube of engine assembly lube. And I need to pick up a sleeve or two of, yeah. Damn it, the name's slipping me now. It'll come to me here in a second. Plastic gauge. Need to get some plastic gauge. I don't think we got any. Okay, there's our gasket. So we can put our bolts in, and then the gasket can go on, and then the pump. And you'd think it would stand to reason, but they had to put instructions in the manual, which means somebody tried to do it wrong. Suction screen on the pump goes down. If it wasn't for the fact that somebody had tried to do it, they would never have to put that instructions, or they would never have to put those instructions in the manual. So it means, you know, somebody somewhere screwed it up. And there's no torque spec on those. You just run them tight. I know I could have grabbed a ratchet, but the wrench was right there on top and the drawer was open, so. And for the inevitable idiots that say I should be doing this with an impact or a zip gun, you run an impact for disassembly. For assembly, you do it all by hand because then you can feel your way into it. Anybody that tells you otherwise should not be turning wrenches. I don't care who they are. I don't care what they say. Okay, so there's the side cover assembled. So with that, we got the side cover done. It's not sitting here. We got the side covers assembled. Planet support carrier is assembled. Sun gear and sprag is assembled. Input shaft assembly is assembled. Overdrive clutch housing and piston. Planet gear carrier and ring gear. And your direct drive clutch pack. So this is all your main sub-assemblies for your 3-speed. So, with that being said, I think I'm going to call it a day on this because it's 5 o'clock. And this video's gotten long enough, so I want to split it into 2 parts. So, this is going to be going through and overhauling all of your sub-assemblies. And then tomorrow, we'll be putting it all together. So basically, the only thing I haven't touched yet is obviously the the overdrive clutch itself, which has to be assembled once you start putting the whole menagerie back together. And then we haven't done anything with the counter shaft yet because you can't do anything with that until it's sitting in the housing. So everything else is squared away. It shouldn't take that long tomorrow. And then once we get it all together, I want to rig something up so that we can spin this thing up with a drill and bench test the clutch pressures, hopefully. Dad's got a big electric drill that should have enough ass to spin this thing up. Hopefully it'll spin it fast enough. So I can't remember if they give you where's the checking oil pressure? Unit installation, design improvements, checking oil circuit pressures. Be sure oil's at proper level and specified operating temperature. Operate with the engine at rated speed. So, I don't know if we can spin this fast enough with a drill or not, because that'd be 2,400 RPM. I don't know if Dad's big drill will do it that fast or not. I guess we'll have to find out. But, like I say, hopefully we can bench test this, and then I can show you how you check your clutch pressures out of the tractor, because you can, obviously it's better to bench test it on an overhaul outside of the tractor. That way you don't get it in the tractor, find out that something's wrong, and then have to tear the engine and everything back out to go back through it and fix what's wrong. But you can check the clutch pressures and everything in the tractor. The problem is if you have to adjust them, you got to pull this here plug out. And there is just barely enough room in the frame to get one hand up in there. So you're trying to turn the plug and fight that spring to get the threads to engage all in one. It's not fun. Did it on my 1600. Did it. I think the 1600 is the only one I've had to do it on so far. But it's not fun to do it outside of or inside the tractor if you have to adjust the clutch pressure. So if we could bench test it outside of the tractor, that would be better. The only thing we'll have to do is make a loop hose for the oil cooler circuit, this guy right here. And obviously put a filter on it because it's going to be full of oil. So anyway, I'm going to get cleaned up and organized here. Our pile of parts has gotten smaller, which is always good. So, guess that's all there is to say about it for today. So that's it for this one. We'll catch you guys on the next one.